Welcome to TOOP TV's newest segment, Fireside Chat. The original Fireside Chat was a regular radio show used by presidents to inform the public of the latest issues. It originated in 1933 and ran until 1944. But now the Fireside Chat is back and we're using it to tell you about the latest real estate issues. It's uninterrupted interviews with the experts in the know. So sit back, relax and enjoy Fireside Chat.
Welcome everybody to my favourite. I love catching up with some of these guys, these chief economists and the people that you see on TV telling us how it's all working. And here in South Australia, we just want to get the South Australian take on it. And today, a great privilege to have with us the chief economist for Commsec, and that's Craig James. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you very much.
Now, Craig, you've been on the show a few times.
Yes.
And, each time you come on, we normally find out stuff that you haven't told the rest of the world. So, you know, it's a bit of a competition to see if you can outdo the last couple of issues, and we need to find out some stuff that nobody knows yet. So, before we get underway, it's a very important question. How are your abs?
How are my abs? Well, I'm persevering. I mean, I'm doing a lot of travel at the moment, so trying to not indulge too much in terms of food, trying to keep the exercise up. So last time I looked, you know, so they were still there, but I could do a little bit more cardio. You know, sort of. I suppose everyone can, you know, sort of get the fat levels down and whatnot. But you know, I'm keeping healthy. I mean, you know, so at the end of the day, that's the main thing. You know, so the whole idea is, you know, sort of keep yourself healthy, so you're able to do the things you want to do. You know, so whether it's work, rest, play, whatever it happens to be. So, yeah, I'm staying healthy, put it that way.
So, Craig, just for those that may not have been following Craig's fame in his health, did you finally win that? What was the actual name of the competition? It was all over the papers and all over the media.
Well, it's called the Men's Health Man for 2011. And, you know, sort of got down to the last 6 finalists. And I thought, you know, it might have been a bit of a chance, but it was the younger, better-looking people that got through, you know, to the end of the day. But to be there amongst the top 6, so I was very pleased about that. You know, sort of because you know, I was the only 49-year-old which was there. I think the next youngest was something like 35. So there was a bit of a gap, you know, sort of to myself. So and it was all a bit of fun, you know, so all a bit of, you know, sort of enjoyment, something outside the comfort zone, and something I can strike off my bucket list, I suppose.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Now, just before we get into the big questions, I'm keen to know you're really the spokesperson for that part of the Commonwealth Bank. So you're basically forecasting and predicting. Is that really, you know, what your key position is, and communicating that all over Australia?
Yeah, very much so. We're doing it while I'm Chief Economist of Commsec, we do talks for the wider bank, so it may be our corporate area, our local business area, and I do get around the place to a lot of cities and regions. You know, so over the last fortnight it's been places like Ballarat, Port Macquarie, you know, here in Adelaide. Yeah, coming week I'm going to be in Darwin, you know, sort of Melbourne. So you get around the place and you get to see what's happening at the coalface. And the first thing I ask any business, you know, sort of certainly our own local business, is say, well, how's things going? And at the moment, the answer's coming back, it's tough. It's tough out there because people do not want to be taking on debt. They don't want to be taking on borrowing. People are well and truly cashed up. They've got plenty of funds to be able to lend the bank, put the money in, you know, so term deposits, whatever it happens to be. So, yeah, I do a fair bit of writing, presenting to customers and clients, doing radio, TV, media type interviews, and representing the organisation.
Craig, I'm interested also to know, are you nervous today being on such a big program as TOOP TV?
Well, this is one of the bigger ones, you know, that I have to do. You know, so I've got to be on my guard because you're going to ask me questions that people don't ask me. So. Well,
we've got a reputation for getting things on TOOP TV that don't appear anywhere else, so we'll see how we go by the end.
Right.
Now, let's get into it. Been a huge amount of bumps and, you know, unbelievable end of the year with what's happening globally. What's your take on it?
Well, the take on it is that I think central banks are finally getting the message, and it's taken them some time, but I think central banks, I think governments are finally getting the message that they need to do what it takes. And those are a very important word, do what it takes, because in the current environment, financial markets aren't giving governments, aren't giving central banks time. You take the situation with Italian bonds or sort of Greek bonds. You may get new governments coming in and they're saying that they're going to do the right thing and get their deficits down and get their debt levels down, but the markets are saying, no, not convinced. So the central banks have had to weigh it in, basically say, look, we're going to provide as much liquidity, as much money as possible to keep things under control. And I think finally central banks are getting the message that they need to do that. And we have a degree of confidence that we've gone through crises in the past, but always we managed to get ourselves into trouble, we managed to get ourselves out of trouble as well. And I think we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Doesn't mean to say all the problems have been solved. Europe still has a big task in terms of getting their debt levels down, getting the deficits in order, but I think they're finally getting the message. But yeah, turbulent times.
Well, London, they've got 1 million people, I think it was 1 million people protesting against the measures that the government are trying to take there, that is freezing salaries for the public service, changing the long-term superannuation arrangements, and they're getting a massive backlash. Are we looking forward to next year seeing that happen pretty much all through Europe? Are we looking to see a lot of unrest as the changes and the cuts necessary cuts are being made, or what's going to happen?
Well, I think we are seeing the knee-jerk type reaction. The knee-jerk type reaction is you announce the cuts, people aren't happy, they go to the streets. But then there's the considered analysis. Then you have to run through and say, well, what are the options available to us? We do need to get our debt in order. We need to get our deficits in order. To be able to do that, what have we got to do in terms of measures? And I think the Italians, I think the Greeks, I think the Portuguese, the Spanish, they've worked through this. They've got rid of governments, new governments sort of come through, and they realise, and I think the people now start to realise, okay, we do have to make the hard decisions. It's not going to be easy going forward, but we have to make the hard decisions. And in the UK, they need to think the same sort of thing. They need to make those hard decisions. The government here in Australia believes they're making the hard decisions in terms of getting our budget deficit down and hopefully pushing into surplus in the next year or so.
The thing that confuses me is that essentially the people of the world do not want to drop their standard of living. And what essentially appears to be happening is that we are winding the clock back and taking away things that were considered, you're right, and redefining that. Is that how you see it, or how would you describe what's happening to people?
Yeah, I think it's the case that people have been on probably a higher standard of living. They've been been on a good wicket for a long period of time, and some of these countries basically need to bite the bullet. We went through the same situation here in Australia, late 1980s, early 1990s, when we went into recession. We had to get our house in order. We had basically our financial crisis at that time. We went into recession, some of the banks almost went to the wall. We had to make the hard decisions, and we did. And I think it takes time. Certainly through the early 1990s, it was a slow recovery. The Liberal government came in, sort of 96, and fortunately they had a period of time, 3 or 4 years, of applied stringency in terms of their own fiscal situation, the budgetary situation. The economy grew, and we were able to turn around, push into surplus, pay off all our debt. So these things can be done, but countries have to realise that it's going to take some pain.
So just staying on the international questions for a moment, do you see a big risk of Greece actually failing? And then, of course, Italy, there's been a lot of discussion about the Italians and the French. And what's your current take on it?
Well, my current take on it is that governments realise, banks realise that you can't let these countries go under. You can't have the house of cards starting its fall, because it's this contagion, the risk of knock-on effects right the way through banking systems and financial systems. It could be like Lehman Brothers, when that crashed in the United States and what happened to the United States economy. So the Europeans are getting all manner of advice to be able to say, you cannot let these institutions go under. And indeed, that's what they're doing at the moment. They're making sure that The governments know that they've got to make the hard decisions, but the institutions like the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund are saying, as long as you make those hard decisions, then we're going to support you. We're going to give you the money that you need. And that's where we're at the moment. And we're confident that this will continue to occur. That, and it's hard for the Europeans. You know, so you think about the European Union, you've got 17 countries that need to come to some agreement on this. And some countries can be, you know, sort of poles apart. Places like the Germans, countries, you know, sort of like Italy and Greece, polar ends in terms of their economic circumstances.
So can you see the German community though, giving to, let's say, the Greek community indefinitely when they know the Germans have done the hard yards, the Greeks have had a party? There must be a point there where the Germans are going to say, I don't think so. You guys sort yourself out and maybe even push them out of the union. Is that likely, or do you think there's too much intertwined, there's too much at stake?
Well, there's a degree of self-interest, and we know that in terms of our own individual situation, you know, sort of here in Australia, self-interest rules. Now, in terms of Germany, they're realising that if the European Union breaks up and they've got to bring back the Deutschmark, well, the Deutschmark is going to be a whole lot stronger than the euro, and if that's the case, then their export industries are going to suffer in a big way. And they're saying, well, perhaps we're on a pretty good wicket, you know, so where we are at the moment with euro. Clearly, it's not the perfect solution, but we're gaining as a result of this. Places like Greece and Italy realise that they're gaining as a result of the solidarity, you know, so that's around the place. So I think self-interest will ensure that the euro is kept together.
Craig, one more question on the international side of it. I had Ralph Norris on, which I was very proud of, and in his interview, or our interview, he mentioned that without the GFC issues, there would have been a global issue in any case relating to unfunded superannuation, unfunded retirement, globally, with the baby boomers coming through. Have you got any comments on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you do have a situation, the fundamental situation is one of demography, one of population. And you have countries in Europe where population growth is going backwards. So you've got that same situation in terms of Japan. Now, if your population is going backwards, clearly that affects the growth of your economy. Your economies barely grow at the same time. But if you haven't been providing for your retirement, for things like your public service, if you're not accumulating the revenues that you need to be able to meet those superannuation liabilities, then something's got to give. Now, fortunately, we've had here in Australia the intergenerational reports. We've got Federal Treasury thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the track and saying, look, we need to have an approach to address this unfunded superannuation problem. And that's what we've done here in Australia. And other countries are coming to grips with that now too. Okay,
so now let's start to really hone in on what most of the viewers are after, and that is what's going to affect their backyard. So let's come back to Australia. There's been some decisions made by the government, and since we spoke last, the carbon tax, the changes to the mining tax. There's been a lot of discussion about coal mining and, you know, losing all of our agricultural, you know, best land to the mining industry just for a cash grab. Where do you see Australia now, right now, and into the 2012?
We are in a good position. We are still in the right place at the right time. So we're still very much dependent on China. And China's going to do all it takes to support their economy and keep growth going. They're going to continue to buy our iron ore, our coal, our resources of all sorts. Asia generally is going to be continuing to grow, and that's good news for Australia. So I think the medium-term outlook for Australia is very good. We've got a very low budget deficit, and the government is committed to pushing into surplus over the next couple of years. It may not get there, but they've got the right approach to getting our budget deficit down. We've got low levels of debt. So we are going in the right sort of way. We've even got the Reserve Bank going in the right sort of way. Back in August, they thought about lifting interest rates. Well, fortunately, they didn't do that. Then in October, they said, well, we may cut rates. In November, indeed, they did cut rates. And the Reserve Bank is now working out the fact that you can have a strong mining sector, but if you've got weak other areas, like the housing sector and the retail area, then you've got to take that into consideration. So we've got inflation under control, and provided you do have inflation under control, then you can cut interest rates. And we saw that in November, and we believe that sort of rates are going to fall again.
Let's go for that. In the paper today, you were predicting that the rates would fall in February. I want to see them. We want to see them fall in December. What's the likelihood of the rates? I mean, tell me about it. When do you think they'll fall? Or what's the official line? What's the unofficial line? Just let us in on the inside story, Craig. The stuff that you can't put into print.
All right. We certainly believe the Reserve Bank should be cutting rates in December, because you weigh up the factors. If inflation's under control, and it's under control, we've got a mining sector and business investment which is going gangbusters, so that's super strong. But retail spending, we're not spending at the moment. We're not borrowing at the moment. The housing sector is weak. You weigh up the influences, and then you have to take into account the global situation. That remains a little bit shaky as well. If we cut interest rates by 25 basis points, another quarter of 1%, would we send our economy over the edge? Well, we wouldn't. So we certainly believe that there is good reasons for the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates in December. Our concern, though, is that the Reserve Bank is very much a reluctant rate cutter. It cut rates in November, but it's still of this belief that our economy is going to be picking up and it's going to be stronger over time. Still worried about inflation. Still more likely to see the glass half full rather than half empty. So while we think they should be cutting rates in December, we just don't think that they're going to have the confidence to be able to do that. The other thing is it's somewhat tactical. They may decide to keep some bullets in the gun, because if the European situation blows up, so we do have a breakup of the euro, or sort of worst case scenario, the Reserve Bank wants to make sure it's got plenty of firepower to be able to put that to work. So I can understand the Reserve Bank holding off until February, and that may be the tactical decision that it wants to take. I think probably sort of better tactical decision would be to cut rates in December, 0.25%, shore things up, but whether it is December or whether it's February, I think rates are coming down.